Hello, my name is Tina Jordan, and I'm the Vice President of Membership for AFCEA International. Welcome to today's Women in AFCEA sponsored panel. I'm really excited about today's panel. Women in AFCEA holds several of these events throughout the year, including our annual Women's Appreciation event that we hold at West in San Diego every year, as well as a Women in Cyber Leadership panel series. Our next two panels will be held in Augusta at AFCEA's TechNet Augusta in Georgia, and in November in TechNet Indo-Pacific in Hawaii. And it's aloha! And it's really nice to have our event schedule back on track. All of the women in AFCEA's panels and receptions are made possible because of the joint sponsorship by Siena Corporation and Walker, powered by USTC. And we are so pleased that they have supported our Women in AFCEA program from the very start, and we couldn't do these panels and our receptions without the support of Siena and Walker, powered by USTC. These Women in Leadership Cyber panels are followed by an open Meet the Panelist reception. And today we are happy to invite you to the reception, what will take place starting at 4 p.m. in the Sharp Street lobby and terrace on the third floor of the Convention Center. So if you go out these doors and up the escalator, if you're looking at where you registered, just go to the left and follow signs and you'll get to the Sharp Street lobby. Also, when you exit the theater, make sure to get a drink ticket because we do have a bar and we have drink tickets to give you. So make sure you get a drink ticket to use at the reception. This panel, a little logistics thing here, this panel has been approved for several continuing education credits. However, you do need to stay for the full hour to receive the credits. The scanners will not be turned on until the very end. So be sure to get your badge scanned before you exit the theater. We cannot take your name if you email us later and ask if we can register you. We can't. It's not the way it works with our certifying organizations. You must be scanned here before you leave the theater. As I mentioned, today's event would not be possible without our supporting partners, and our sponsors for this panel and reception again are Siena and Walker. I would now like to introduce Debbie Justice, Director of Federal Channels at Siena Government Solutions. Debbie will introduce our moderator of the panel, who will then have the panelists introduce themselves. Debbie Justice joined Siena Government Solutions in 2019 as Director of Federal Channels. Debbie is responsible for development and execution of partner strategy to support Siena's Government Solutions go-to-market strategies. Prior to joining Siena, Debbie worked as a major account manager covering systems integrators, and prior to that as a senior strategic alliance manager, primarily supporting the intelligence community. Debbie Justice holds a Master's of Technology in Technology Management, a Master of Science in Technology Management from the University of Maryland University College. So please put your hands together with me and let's give Debbie Justice a warm AFCEA welcome.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you all for being here today. As Tina mentioned, Siena has been a longtime sponsor of this women's series, and we're thrilled to see it thriving and continue and look forward to supporting it for a long time to come. So now what I'd like to do is introduce Charlene Mallory. Let me just get my notes here. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So I'm honored to be here today, and again, looking forward to hearing the panelists' differing views on cyber challenges and how they're going to meet those. Especially pleased to introduce Ms. Charlene Mallory, the moderator of this panel. Charlene leads the Federal Growth Organization across Microsoft Federal, which includes defense, federal civilian, and intelligence. She has responsibility for business development, strategic capture, mission strategy, pursuit, and proposal teams. Charlene was recently featured with Global Touch as a leading 2021 IT executive and as a former executive officer with the White House Military Office. Prior to joining Microsoft, Charlene worked as a director of strategic initiatives at Red Hat, and before that as vice president of business development and strategy for Ultra, where she led a diverse cybersecurity portfolio. Before transitioning to industry, Charlene served as a senior officer in the U.S. Navy. While serving at the U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, she was a member of the Navy Configuration Management Control Board and led critical infrastructure programs worldwide. Charlene currently serves on the AFCEA International's board and its cyber committee, the board of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce, and as a co-chair of the Virginia Innovation and Technology Council. She holds a BS in engineering from the U.S. Naval Academy and an MS in engineering from Stanford University, CISSP and CISM accreditations, and is a registered professional engineer in Virginia. Thank you, Charlene, for loaning us your time and talent on this Women in Leadership panel here today. We're looking forward to a great discussion.
I've learned we have to move these forward. Thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm super excited today as we have 4 distinguished panelists, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. As we talk about today cybersecurity and NIST and the risk management framework. So I think we noted we have an opportunity for some accreditation for training, so thank you for that. And now I'd like to kind of go through and have our panelists introduce themselves. I'd like to start with, on the end there, with Colonel Lagares.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Colonel Marisa Lagares, and I wear 3 hats. I am the Executive Officer to the Chief Information Officer, Mr. Raj Iyer, or Dr. Raj Iyer. I am also the Acting Cybersecurity Director for the Office of the CIO, and I am also Acting CISO for the Army. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Cassandra Lewis. I serve as the Chancellor for the College of Information and Cyberspace. For those of you who don't know our school, we are one of 5 component colleges at National Defense University in Fort McNair, right across from the baseball stadium. I have been at CIC for 14 years, and I think our careers probably coincided because in that 14-year span, I think I've held pretty much every possible position at CIC. I started actually as a program manager, went to assistant dean, then associate dean, then dean, and here we are as chancellor. So it's been a fantastic opportunity to be at such a great organization, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Can you guys hear me? Perfect. My name is Jennifer Hanks. I am CEO of MMC Consulting. We are an acquisition management consulting firm, and we also provide program management and workforce development training to the acquisition workforce. My background is primarily serving as an acquisition expert over the past 15 years, supporting both industry clients as well as the federal government. I was a contracting officer for USAID, where I served both domestically and internationally, delivering acquisition support. In our practice now, as CEO, I have the dual role of running the organization and making sure that we provide security both to our infrastructure as well as to our clients. And so I'm providing that perspective today on the importance of cybersecurity controls for small businesses and why that helps our government run in the way that it should.
Good afternoon. My name is Serena Chan. I am the current Senior Technical Advisor in the Operations and Infrastructure Center at DISA. In this role, I'm lending my analytic skills to providing critical recommendations in the development and operations of cybersecurity technologies, IT systems, tools, and enterprise services. So in this role, I'm currently refining integrated processes across the agency, operationalizing innovative capabilities, and also transforming data into meaningful information so that we can share effectively and enable enhanced decision making.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I thought we'd just start off today with generally about risk. You know, I think about risk in a lot of different ways. Technical risks, there's physical risks, there's all kind of things that we deal with in our daily lives. I think about, you know, check my email on my phone, maybe I did some mobile banking, maybe managing my own healthcare. You know, there's a lot of things that we do day to day that involve information technology. And I was wanting to pose a question just as a little opener here to the panel about how we can better understand risk management in cybersecurity as it relates to just our daily lives. So, Colonel?
That's an easy one. I'm from New York, and as I was driving into Baltimore today, I was looking at the environment, right? And I'm like, okay, don't know anyone, whole lot of traffic. I'm going to park in a dark parking lot. Well, what do I need to mitigate these risks? And that's the same thing that you have to think about when we're talking about systems, right? You need to know, especially today, what is the data that you're accessing? And so as you start building, like, am I just going in there and looking at different colors? Am I going in there and accessing financial information or PII? Same thing in our daily lives, right? And so if you have children, you guys go through the whole routine, and I don't have any children, but I have sisters that have a lot of kids. But you buckle them into a car. You buy that seat, and you buy a good seat that is approved and validated, right? And you buy it because you want to protect your child. You go to the bank, and now they have those little, when you're using your ATM card, they have those little covers because they know that people are stealing your pins. And so all of these little things collectively, everyone's doing risk management every day. And even into the evening, every night I floss my teeth because I love to eat candy. And I floss my teeth and I brush them because I don't want to have cavities, right? And so I'm mitigating that risk. So as you go out through your day, everyday life, you're doing these things, probably 10, 11, 12 different things, even before you exit the door. I mean, I know Gary Winch over here, you can think of a couple of things that you've done today to mitigate any risks that are posed to you, or perhaps something that you're working on at work. And so I would just say that whatever your environment is, assess your environment and see what you have to do to not only protect yourself, protect your environment, the people around you, your kids, your family, and your coworkers. And I hope that sets the stage of what risk management is all about. We do it every day.
Sorry, super, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I get that, and we think about that too as we, try to mitigate. And I love how you use the word mitigate, not eliminate. So I think there was a long time we talked about eliminating the risk, and now it's mitigating for sure. And now we pivot kind of to work, and when I'm at work, I think about framing things in people, processes, and things, products and outcome. And there's so many things that come to mind when we talk about information technology. And we talk a lot about risk on the AFCEA Cyber Committee. But I'd like to kind of ask now, as we talk about our professional lives, what are some of the big components that you consider in cyber risk?
So I'll jump in on this question because it's certainly one that we wrestle with at the College of Information and Cyberspace. So just to give you just a bit more context of CIC and what we do, we are a graduate institution under the Department of Defense, and we educate senior level military and civilian leaders, as well as allied and partner fellows, really around the area of cyberspace and information. Our goal and our mission really is to educate joint warfighters, national security leaders, and the cyber workforce to be able to really lead and advise in using the information instrument of national power in cyberspace. So we think about risk, we think about cyber risk a lot because that's certainly part of our mission set. And then in terms of what we think about, understanding that when we're talking about cyber risk, what we're really talking about, threats, vulnerabilities, and one of my professors actually has a great formula. And the formula is threats times vulnerabilities over whatever countermeasure that you're putting in place times impact. So when you really have to judge these threats and vulnerabilities against the actual impact that it will have on your organization, really powerful and simple way, in my mind, of really understanding risk. So one of the things that we wrestle with just in daily university life, recognizing that we have a responsibility to help our students understand cyberspace and information, not only from the strategic level, but for them to provide them an opportunity to get hands-on. We're not a technical school, but we do appreciate the opportunity to give our students exposure to what they would experience if there was a malware attack in their organization, or if they were breached in somehow, or just trying to get senior leaders. A lot of the senior leaders that come to CIC, that some of them may be technical, some of them may be generalists. And another faculty member likes to think about it this way. A lot of our senior leaders that come to us for education, it's like they fell into cyber backwards, right? So they may not have entered through the front door. They may not come with that technical skills. So how then can we really provide that opportunity? So we value labs. And we value having them get in there to really experiment and really get in there and understand these concepts. Well, one of the conflict that we had with our CIO at NDU was whether or not we can have our labs. This was several years ago, and we're actually still working through this now. But how can we allow our faculty and our students to have a safe environment for that testing and that experimentation to occur, while still making sure that our networks are safe? So that type of trade-off, that really prioritizing, okay, this is mission essential for us. We have a teaching mission, so we have to be able to have that environment that allows our students to learn. But at the same time, our CISO is saying, well, you know what's mission essential for us is to keep our network safe. So really thinking through these different opportunities that you can have to support your stakeholders, while at the same time making sure you're prioritizing and you're really coming up with a strategy to address risk and how it may impact the organization in a broader scope. So that's kind of how we think about it at NDU.
Thank you. And, so we have a diverse panel here, with Chancellor Lewis representing NDU, and we also have Ms. Hanks here from a small business. So I really would like to hear your perspective as a small business owner, your best practices for handling cybersecurity risk in your business.
Thank you. So some of the components that are really important to us is understanding our infrastructure. As we're selling our services to the government, we need to make sure we have the right infrastructure so that they feel confident that we can deliver in a way that makes them feel like their information and their systems are going to be protected. And having our main line of business supporting the acquisition workforce, they're responsible for putting out requirements. And so we have to have a very strong knowledge of what the cyber requirements would be put up on other contractors like ourselves, right? And so making sure that everyone in our organization has a basic foundation of cybersecurity, the risk for our organization and also the risk for the government. What's important to them, and how do we make sure that we protect them from that perspective? And then as we're supporting them, making sure that the staff and the requirements that they put out, that acquisition support staff, that they have the knowledge to make sure that they've incorporated the right clauses, that they understand that when they're writing the statements of work, that they're incorporating risk mitigation plans to ensure that they have everything in place to make sure that they deliver a successful and a very strong proposal to put out to industry to respond to. And they have to understand more about cyber than they used to. And so that's been a challenge for us, is making sure that there's an education component that's incorporated into our support services to the government, so that we're providing knowledgeable, skilled support staff, and that we're also at the same time educating their staff as needed. Making sure also that there's adequate resources from a small business standpoint. It is an expense that a lot of small businesses didn't previously have to take into consideration. And so making sure that you budget for CMMC implementation, making sure that you understand the risk that it poses to your organization, but also the benefits that it provides to the government, to your staff, from a professional standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. We, working in the acquisition space, we hold a lot of information that is sensitive, and we have to make sure that we do our best to protect that information through our networks, and that it's also protected, especially now that we're working remotely. That protection and confidence in the government of our infrastructure is really important to them, and so we have to make sure that our team understands that and that they do everything. And it really starts from the top down, and holding ourselves accountable from a leadership standpoint, and making sure that we're setting the example to our team, and then that translates into the client space as well.
Just want to make sure no one else wanted to comment. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot there, as a small business owner, that you have, in addition to running your business and all of those things, and then being respectful of the environment that you're servicing, in the federal space. I want to kind of go back to curriculum, because I feel like this theme of training, has come up here, and to how you can get a handle on all the information and things that you need to know. So kind of posing something to Dr. Lewis back to about the key principles that you include in your curriculum for managing risk in cyber systems.
So we really try to take our students through a comprehensive understanding of risk management frameworks, right? So I think one of the key things that we teach them is really to understand, one, the origins. We want them to understand the law. We want them to understand what the law says, what the responsibilities are for CISOs. We want them to understand that there are best practices that are out there that will help guide them. Help them think about risk management really as a disciplined approach to cybersecurity. We're not talking about checklists. We're not talking about a one and done where you're touching it once. You're touching it once every 3 years. That's the whole point of DoD adopting a risk management framework, so they understand that this is a iterative, continuous process, and that it is really built on having a strategy that senior leaders really start then identifying the risks within their organization, that they then start saying, okay, so what is my risk appetite like? How much risk can I really tolerate for my organization? So you're assessing, you're identifying, and then you're understanding that if something happens in your organization, then how do you respond? How do you identify that a breach has occurred? And then what are the steps that you're going to take to both mitigate as well as to monitor a situation? So those are kind of like the frameworks, right? So everyone, if you've been around risk management framework, you know that these principles are generally the high level steps that one has to take when thinking through risk on a holistic level. But we're really trying to hone in on having our students think strategically about this, right? So it is asking them to think about their organizational culture. What is their organizational culture around risk? Do they really think about alternative approaches, one, to identifying risk as well as to mitigating it? It's really easy to fall into groupthink, especially in an organization, whether it's a large or a small organization. It's really easy to have a sense that we're comfortable, that we've figured out all of the vulnerabilities in our space, and so therefore we're prepared. But how do we get the students to think outside of the box and say, you know what, I am so close to the problem, how can I step back, think about alternative approaches? How can I make sure that the thinking about risk is not stuck at the C level, but it comes all the way down and it engages all levels of the organization? How can I bring in the awareness and the training that's so important? And then another piece that we think about when we roll out these principles for our students is also recognizing that, yes, we can follow a framework that is iterative, but then there are things that senior leaders really need to be concerned about, which is collaboration and communication. And sometimes these leadership skills don't get enough credit in discussions about risk. But guess what? If you're not communicating, if there isn't that cross-section of collaboration within your organization, you may have an iterative process that's stuck in one place, and you're not drawing the threads out and connecting different individuals within the organization, so you can have that really richness of thought. So those are some of the things that that's a lot, and they're not all in one class. We cover them in multiple courses and multiple programs, but that's what we try to get at. Educating, yes, getting that sense on an enterprise level, but what are strategic thinkers, and really trying to get that critical thinking in as well.
Sorry. So I think it's also really important to recognize that in today's hyper-connected world, that risk management is really a team sport. Like you said, it's going to run the gamut of the entire spectrum. So from concept development of information technology or a system, through acquisitions, through contracting, through testing, development, production, and then pushing it out into the field, and also maintaining and sustaining that system. So it's making sure that we have safe and secure communications, continuity of operations. That is all about not eliminating risk, but also just managing risk, right? So, but I think it's also important to remember that as cybersecurity professionals, we are so focused on that enterprise. You know, we know how to keep email safe, networks, operating systems, printing devices, and other technologies, but cybersecurity touches everything that we do as individuals. We have so many devices, even our own personal devices, that we need to remember to train people to be aware of basic cybersecurity practices. So just basic cyber hygiene. So you as a user at home, you know, installing antiviruses, malware software, and scanning for viruses, how to update your apps, web browsers, and operating systems on a regular basis, changing passwords or using multi-factor authentications. All these little things can help to protect yourselves and then the larger enterprise, because if you connect it, you should be protecting it as well.
Also add, and as I put on my other role as the cybersecurity director, I have to look at the workforce, and I'm going to have an offsite next week. And I look at the workforce because our workforce is aging, and I'm trying to recruit some folks. But I have to think about the folks that are in positions today that are going to be with us for the next 5 to 10 years. And we're rolling out these new technologies, and I have the responsibility of ensuring that I upskill the folks that are on the workforce. And so to understand the risk to the systems today, they have to understand the technology, right? And so I'll give you cloud for an example. How are you going to secure cloud when fundamentally most of the time it's the commercial vendor that's securing it for you? But our cybersecurity folks in the workforce have to be upskilled so that they know, so that they understand what their responsibility is, because in the cloud, when we have issues, and I'm going to keep picking on Gary because he knows this, is that when something happens, industry points to us and we point to them because we don't understand when it comes to the contracting what we have assumed as risk, especially when it comes to the data, because at the end of the day, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, we're responsible for that data. But if our folks aren't understanding then we're wrong as leaders. And so as we move forward, we need to make sure that we're looking back and looking at our workforce and ensuring that we're taking care of the folks that take care of us every day.
Maybe one more thing on training, and then we'll kind of move to the next thing. To you, Ms. Hanks, I know that you're a member or a fellow with the National Contract Management Association, so you have a strong acquisition background, and you're training and part of the workforce that I think our panelists are talking about. Can you give us a perspective on how you frame that acquisition training and to fold in these things on risk and cybersecurity risk?
Yes. So I have a lot of responsibilities around cybersecurity for our organization and our workforce. I am not a SME, right? And we have to be really careful of making sure we understand what we know and what we don't know. And a lot of the acquisition professionals that I support and train through our organization, there's a new generation of contracting folks coming up, and risk mitigation and cybersecurity are somewhat new concepts that they're delving into. And so part of what we're doing, I currently provide support to USAID's workforce, and they're both CONUS and no CONUS. So we have about 11,000 members of the acquisition workforce that we manage and train. And we have taken the approach of making sure that we're helping them get credentials around cybersecurity, not because they work and support a CIO, but because they are going to come in contact with different types of requirements that are going to have some type of technology or SaaS supporting it. And they need to be aware of the language, they need to be aware of just different things that they need to be thinking about, and how their role is going to shape that solution that's going to be delivered from that requirement. And so we're constantly looking at the curriculum and making sure that they have access to the resources that they need. We're revising some of the curriculum to make sure that as the requirements are changing and the framework is changing, that they're aware of those types of things. And so it's a constant communication with the workforce of saying, these are the changes that have taken place. I would say it's almost a weekly communication, just because you can't capture everybody, and they're not reading every single email that you're sending out. We have multiple forms of communication. I did a training last night at 10 o'clock at night because we're working in different regions as well. And that's just because we have such a big workforce. It's really important that they understand this, and we want to make sure that they get it in any way possible. And so DAU, they now have a credential for cybersecurity and risk management for program management professionals with an acquisition background. So we're supporting them getting that type of training. There's also, DAU has a cyber enterprise team that they're using to support and keep up to date all of the curriculum that's housed within their organization. The recent merge to FAIC with the DoD and the civilian workforce, we're trying to make sure that we're adding new trainings that can go across government-wide and make those available, because different agencies have different risks that they're managing, and they have different scenarios, and we're trying to cross-share that information across government. And so as we develop new trainings that impact our workforce, we're trying to share. We do a lot of collaboration with other agencies to make sure that that information that we have available, we share, and that we're also seeing it from different perspectives across government, because it might impact us down the road. And so the constant way of thinking about how are we preparing them for the future, it's all about providing them training that's not stagnant. It's in real time, and as things come to fruition, as things are changing the environment, we have things going on in Ukraine, the elections, all of those things impact the environment in which we operate in. And us being in an international environment, we have those things that impact our requirements and our staff, and how cybersecurity relates to those professionals that we support.
Thank you. So I, it's really hard for me to not have echoing my head, lifelong learner, because I think that's what it takes to really stay energized and connected to the cyber, just because it changes so much, and there's obviously a lot of things here. So thanks for sharing. I think I'd like to pivot now and dial us in a little bit more to RMF. So we can't call RMF new anymore. It's been 8 years. A lot of the workforce, I would say, is grew up, if you will, with DIACAP, and so now we have RMF. So there's a framework, and it's almost a framework of frameworks. There's a lot there of links and publications to draw upon. I'd like to ask the panel, in the 8 years since initial implementation, what are some of the biggest benefits that we now can talk about, that we've seen that have been achieved with RMF?
So as you know, RMF is that process for identifying, implementing, assessing, and managing cybersecurity capabilities and services, expressed as security controls, and then authorizing the operation of that information system or the platform information technology system. The implementation of RMF in DoD has had both advantages and disadvantages. RMF has allowed the use of one process for all government institutions. It allows for better specificity controls for alignment with common control providers. Within DISA, this has allowed us to manage our service level agreements by articulating the controls that we provide to our mission partners. So these controls are available in EMAS for our mission partners to inherit, informing the authorizing officials of the infrastructure and hosting risks to their systems. There are some disadvantages that we've seen. Having granular control has driven the DoD to a very checklist-like culture and away from the concept of really risk management. So I think the DoD is working to reshape that implementation so that we can really focus on the risk management intent.
And so I'll add to risk the risk management framework is that every time, in my experience, that you hear RMF, everyone shies away. Oh my God, an ATO. Oh my God, that 3 years went, really quick. And here I am again looking at all these controls, the daunting list, right? But as she just mentioned, it's a standard way of assessing the security of a system. And if you break it down into different pieces, it's really not that bad. I think it gets a bad rap because people think it takes so long, but they just don't understand the process. It is good that we do have 8 years later a structured way of doing things across the DoD. Especially how it allows you to do the reciprocity. And I believe that's probably one of the questions that's coming up here is reciprocity. And so if Marisa owns this system and I do my ATO, then I can turn and say, hey, Dr. Lewis, come into my home. I've already gotten my ATO and I will give you all of these controls that you can inherit, right? It's called reciprocity. But there's a key element of reciprocity, and it's cool because it's building that trust and relationship between different organizations, the different services. And so if I've done my due diligence and I have my ATO, then I can allow someone else, and I will go ahead and I will allow her to inherit the controls. But fundamentally, it's key that you trust that person. And I'll give you an example. We were doing an ATO for Sea Army, and initially we were partnering with the Air Force, and we were looking for reciprocity for all of the good work that they've done, right? And so if we're in an environment now that we have less resources and we have to do more with less, then why not leverage RMF to go ahead, look at a system and say, hey, you know what, you've already done it. I want to leverage your reciprocity. Can we do that? And check that box in EMAS and drive on and just do the controls that are for your, the rest of your system. It's not that hard. It is daunting, but you have to look at the bigger picture where you can leverage. There's a reason we went to RMF. It's standardizing, right? And you're not the first person that's out there authorizing a cloud. You're not the first person out there authorizing an application. So do your best to network, build relationships, and get reciprocity because it's less work.
I just want to chime in to say one thing about why I think the RMF still has so much potential, because I think what it's done is actually to raise awareness on a whole lot of things that previously were not getting the type of attention that I think they really deserve, such as the supply chain. I think we were certainly having conversations about vulnerabilities in the supply chain, but I really think RMF really drove that lesson home. So if you have all of these suppliers and they're touching your network, making sure that they're held to the same standard, at least that's the vision, right? That's the goal. It does then shine a light on, okay, where are you getting this chip from? Disclaimer. Let me do a disclaimer here. I'm an educator. I am not a cyber SME. So if I say chip, that's my faculty will slap my hands later. They'll give me the correct term. But but the point is, right? It's shining that light on the supply chain. Where are you, not only what's within your network, but what maybe outside of your network that will impact you. So you have to, RMF really drives home that you have to think about all of these threats and vulnerabilities in a really keen and particular way, because it opens you up to higher levels of risk. And then when you're really thinking about the integrity of your network, you have to ask yourself some really tough questions if you really can't. I know you're going to correct me, so I'll have you come in from the small business perspective as well. I think that's a really keen awareness that's necessary.
No, I think bringing up the supply chain is really important. It has definitely brought a lot of awareness to the supply chain. I think a lot of small businesses were just like, oh my God, this is one more thing I have to, expense for and be, and monitor, right, with limited resources. However, it does present significant opportunities for small business if they do the work. You now have a framework. It takes some of the guesswork out of it. And I think, having that really sets the tone of posturing your organization in a position of strength, which provides opportunities for those larger organizations that need additional support. And if you can be that small business that has positioned yourself in that manner and taken advantage of the framework for your organization, it's a win-win for the government, for the large vendor, the small vendor. and the mission.
Great, thank you. And we'll come back to reciprocity because that is super important for sure. So I want to pivot a little bit to one of my favorite topics in RMF, software factories in particular, and continuous monitoring and continuous ATO. So, federal agencies now, we see them moving fast. There's lots of comments on that to develop, field, update, move to production, immediately. And all trying to do that while being, risk managed secure. There's containers and Air Force's RMF next, ATO in a day. It's going super fast. And a lot of that depends on that ability to continuously monitor and the CATO or the continuous ATO in particular. In fact, it's called the gold standard now in cybersecurity. So just wanted to pose this to Dr. Chan. Last month you had some remarks that you shared on a webinar series about velocity, speed, and directionality. And I love that. Because I immediately was thinking about continuous ATO. So I'd really like to get your perspective from an RMF perspective. What's your thoughts on that?
Thank you. So I think we heard from Colonel that, the current process for ATO is, time consuming and can be costly to a program, right? And it's also very static. It's just a point in time look at the system. And so we're trying to really improve that process by moving to continuous ATOs. It allows us to streamline compliance and mitigating the risk and enabling agencies to really deploy new capabilities faster. But yet we do know there will be some challenges with CATOs as well. We're always challenged with the process change, right? Moving the community and getting the culture to move with any sort of change is always challenging. The second challenge is also technology, right? To be really truly continuous, we're going to need to be API driven, real time, machine to machine interfacing. And this will require continuous monitoring. And I think if you were here yesterday morning, you heard General Skinner talk about how we aren't really where we want to be with RMF. We're really trying to understand holistically the risk of what we're accepting when we put out capabilities and tools. And I think most people still view RMF as an administrative process. So we really need to kind of move that cybersecurity and security engineering to the left. And that's where I usually think about more the engineering piece. We want to be able to make sure security is in that architectural design, right? So the landscape of threats are ever evolving. And so we also need to be able to kind of balance the capability features that we want our tools to have, but we also need to be able to protect those capabilities and features as well. So it is going to be a tight balance because baking security in is costly, but it is going to be well worth it later if you can be flexible to meet the threats as well.
Thank you. I'd like to pose something to Colonel Lagares. So when you say software factory and continuous ATOs, I'd like to hear about the new factory in Austin. That's awesome. And your perspective as that relates to CATOs and shift left.
Yes, thank you. And so we do have a software factory down at Futures Command, and we call this software factory, the platform is called Create. And so it is DevSecOps, and it's built, people can go ahead and they can develop, and you have all those security checks, and at the end of the day, you produce some application, and it's continuous. Whether we're at a CATO state, I wouldn't say that. DOD is pushing out policy on what CATO is, and will absolutely align with what DOD pushes at the CIO's office pushes out to us. But what we're looking at right now is we have an authorized platform. We have developers in there developing and producing software end to end, and it's a continuous process. And so in a perfect world, you would have an application that comes out the back end and it's secure and it's continuous. And then if you have any development, you just do your software development, it goes through the widgets, it goes through the security checks, and it's just continuously you're getting those updates. But are we at a steady state where we can say that every application that is being developed in our platform will receive a CATO? I think not. We're not there yet, but we are going to get there. And so I would posture to every security person in here is that just don't look at the application. You have to, for a CATO, you really have to look at the platform that is producing that, right? And so what is the house that you're using for DevSecOps? And if you're not looking from the OSI stack yeah, I can get a little geeky. From the OSI stack, you have to look at everything, right? And you have to look at you have to look at the code, you have to look at the application, you have to look at the physical connection for that for your platform, your DevSecOps platform. And if you're not looking and assessing whether that platform is secure, then we're wrong as security professionals. And like I said, the DoD CIO's office is pushing out guidance on how to achieve that platform that is CATL. And I am here to tell you that they are looking at not only the application, but they're looking at your platform. Are you good enough to allow people to come and play in your playground and leave at the end of the day with a secure product?
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to pick up on something Dr. Chan said about shift left and security. So software factories, continuous ATO, I mean, it's hard and expensive maybe to bolt on versus built-in security. I'd really like to get some feedback about RMF and how it drives that shift left with bringing in security early in the beginning as a team member instead of compliance checking at the end. If you want it.
Do you want it? No. So in terms of shift left, that's not really my area of expertise. But one of the things that we've been working on in our organization is a SaaS solution. And from a design phase, we had to take into consideration understanding the platforms for both organizations and the infrastructure of both, and seeing, is it possible to build the solution that we were trying to build? We didn't have all the answers, but we made a lot of assumptions where they needed to be made, and had a lot of collaborative discussions around what each organization had, what they needed, and what the desired end state would be. And so I would say around a period of 6 months, it was a lot of Q&A, like asking questions. What do we know about the platforms that we're trying to build and put into place, and what are we trying to achieve? And we still don't have, this is something that's active, and we don't have all the answers, but we're going back, we're bringing in the experts that we need to help us figure that out. And it's a continuous process, and there's a lot of resources that we're trying to pull together, because it is a need for this organization, and they want to make sure that we do all of this fact-finding at the front end, as opposed to getting down midstream and saying, oh, we didn't think about this, we didn't consider this aspect of it, so what do we do now? Do we stop, or do we keep going to what end? And so I would say I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it's really important to put a lot of time in on the front end of really just doing that fact finding and the discovery of what you're trying to accomplish, and making sure that everyone kind of gets what they need out of the solution that you're creating. And so with this being SaaS, cybersecurity was day one. What does the infrastructure of the provider look like, and how are they going to manage it, monitor it? And so those were a lot of the discussions that we were having, we're still having, because we want to make sure that it's a success, and it's going to start in a pilot phase, so that we're not deploying something that may or may not work. And so understanding the reality of the situation and some of the unknowns, we're doing our due diligence very early in the process to make sure that we mitigate the risk in an active manner.
If I can say a couple of things about shifting security to the left. Forget about shifting it to the left. I would posture that we need to integrate security from the very beginning. And I say this because I always feel like I'm walking into the office and it's, Colonel Lagares, we have a problem. And so then I have people turning on, trying to fix the issue that we created. And so I would say that, integrate your folks at the very onset. Get your cybersecurity folks in the room when you're coming up and drafting a contract. Your PWS, you should have your folks in there so that they can help you, educate you on what needs to be in that contract. When you're doing your DevSecOps, have your folks in the same room, your developers with your security engineers. So there's that crosstalk. There's a lot of education when it comes to cybersecurity. And I think Maurice's perspective is we don't get invited to the table because people are afraid they're going to say no or there's too much. She's going to come in here with 1,000 RMF controls, and it's not the case. We're passionate about what we do. We went to school and we do this every day. We're here to help industry. We're here to help our organizations be better, right? Because at the end of the day, for Colonel Lagares here, I want to ensure that we give our warfighters a secure platform to meet mission, right? And I'm sure that everyone here sitting here today didn't come here to just look at us up here. You want to be educated on where we're going, right? And so I would just say that when whatever you work on, if you're a basket weaver, get one of your cybersecurity persons out there to help you, mitigate any risks that you may come across as you're weaving this basket. And I joke up here, but it's just funny because every day I have a couple of different whiteboards in my office. I have the XO1, the CISO1, and the CSD, right? And it's always like, I try to erase some of the stuff off of there, but it seems like the one for the cybersecurity and the CISO, I keep adding to my list because I keep getting problems that we need to try to solve. And that shouldn't be the case, because if we're integrating our cybersecurity folks, if we're allowing them to come to the table, then we wouldn't be in the state that we are today. We wouldn't be trying to play catch up on all of these things that we're playing catch up on.
I also just want to add to what you were saying about integrating security in that beginning of the loop, right? So we've moved from the model of DevOps to DevSecOps so that we're really integrating security way in the beginning. And the only reason I was only talking about a little bit shifting to the left is we always think about acquisition as linear, right? We have these milestones we're trying to get through to the end where we're going to then be fielding the capability of the information system. And as operators and defenders of that capability, we are accepting the risk management decisions that were made early on by other team members. We have to understand supply chain risk management. We have to understand acquisition risk, which is always about the cost, schedule, and the time and the performance. But it's integral to understand what is holistic in operational risk. And that's something that we're trying to really get stronger at in the agency, so that way we can work together with the other teams in acquisitions, the program staff, and also to work in designing those security elements into the system early on, so that way we can be more a risk managed environment. We know we can't be risk adverse, so this is the way we have to be moving forward.
So this conversation reminds me of, sorry, can you hear me now? Yes, thank you. Our, as you know, Chris English is our very first national cyber director, and it reminds me of thinking of his vision for really how the nation is going to combat cyber problems, because he has a framework where he talks about cyber education for the few, the many, and all, right? And so part of that is that, okay, so we may have some few technical people who would really understand how to bake it into the system. They'll understand the software design process. They'll understand how to set up our networks to keep it secure. They'll understand how to come up with this kind of integrated approach. Everyone else, though, has a responsibility. And so that is why I went back to why my curriculum really then focuses on, no matter what our senior leaders, our national security leaders that come to our College for Education, we impress upon them that, listen, it's not just for your CISOs. You really have to understand how to make your system secure. How do you communicate and collaborate with your security people so that you can really formulate this risk management approach that is going to be systemic and continuous throughout our organization. But I'm still only talking to a national security environment. And so what I really appreciate even about his vision for how, as a nation, we have to tackle this security problem is that this type of education needs to be pushed out into law schools, into business schools. I mean, he's gone further talking about how it really needs to go in through K through 12 education. And so no matter where you sit on that continuum, no matter what aspect of the organization that we sit ourselves in, RMF, that's our responsibility. It's not just for what we typically point to as our security folks, like that's their job, but we all have a role in this because it's only going to be in that comprehensive, integrated approach that we will really realize the vision truly of RMF. And I think that's part of why it's really unfair. And I think our security people get a bad rap because they're like Sisyphus, right? Rolling that rock up the hill and it keeps sliding back because not everyone in the organization has that understanding that security, cybersecurity, risk management, it's not just for your security people, but it's for everyone in the organization. And I guess that's part of the integrated approach to even dealing with that as well.
I'm ready to sign up for your class. That's great. Isn't this a great panel? I just love this discussion, and I think that's a great point to kind of end. I think we have time for one or two questions, but before we do, I just wanted to remind everybody, for those of you that follow AI, the RMF AI draft came out last month. NIST has had 2 workshops in March. For those of you who are interested in providing comment, it's out for public comment until Friday. So you have a couple of days, and then they're going to do, I understand, maybe one more workshop and then kind of close it out. But would encourage anybody, just in terms of if you're here to contribute, would like to, take a look at it. It's right downloadable online.
So if we do a lightning round, we can do 2 questions. If it's a long question with long answers, there's 1 question. So do we have anybody with just a quick question that we could do a lightning round? Oh, they must all be long questions.
Yeah, we'll have to say reciprocity and zero trust for the upstairs reception.
Right. Oh, wait, we do. Ed from Hawaii chapter. Aloha.
Ladies, give me a letter grade, A through F, where you feel we're at risk management in our DoD.
Who wants to start with that one?
Educators here got to give a grade.
Here's it to the colonel that said she has a list. Maybe in me, I would give us a C. And that's fair enough. I won't say why, but yeah, I see people cringing, but I'm just a realist. I know what's out there. And I believe, Marisa believes, that it's just that education is we're moving out fast and we're delivering capabilities that we need to have that workforce upskilled to understand what we truly are delivering and holistically how through zero trust we can get there and deliver secure products to our warfighters.
I thought I was going to be the harsh grader and giving it a C also. There are good cases out there, and I think that's what we're trying to do. We always learn from each of them, and that way we can try to do continuous improvement as well.
I am a professor as well. I wear that hat. So there's always room for improvement, right? You never give an A because you can give them a B plus and give that student room to grow. And not to be a hard grader, but and you're right, there are some jewels out there. And that's why I said earlier is that you need to partner with those folks and you need to network so that they can assist you. And I know I've worked with plenty of cybersecurity, and we want to talk and we want to tell you how excited we are about security and all of these new widgets that are coming out. And so we're more than willing to help other organizations. And getting back to reciprocity, that's work that we've already done. Happy to help. And so it's not to be harsh. I'm just a realist, and there is always room for improvement.
I don't think I have enough information to give a grade. So I'm going to use another ploy, which is Saved by the Bell. Yeah.
All right, let's give this panel a round of applause. What phenomenal insights that you all bring. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, your knowledge, and just your time with us today. We certainly are humbled that you would take time to support our event and be here with us today, so thank you very much. And I'm assuming you'll all be upstairs at the reception from 4 to 5, so if you do have questions that you just didn't want to bring up now, or if they weren't quite lightning round questions, to meet and talk with the panelists while we're up at the reception. So with that, Charlene, thank you very much for hosting the panel. Thank you all very much for being part of this. As a token of our appreciation, Women in AFCEA will be making a donation on behalf of each of our panelists to Girls Who Code. It's a nonprofit organization that aims to support and increase the number of women in computer science. Okay, so just a reminder, as I mentioned at the beginning, this panel serves to provide continuing education credits. There is a scanner, so make sure you get your badges scanned if you're here for the CEUs. And then if you could look, turn your necks in the back, and you'll see Susan and Carmen. If you all can wave, they have the all-important drink tickets. So make sure you see Susan on the way out, grab a drink ticket, and then we will reconvene back upstairs at 4 p.m. at the Sharp Street lobby and terrace for our Women in AFCEA sponsored reception, sponsored by Siena and Walker. Thank you again, Debbie and Siena, and thank you to Walker.